This podcast serves Middle Tennessee every weekday morning, and it's made possible by member support. Learn how you can make a difference at WPLN.org/support.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's June 13th, 2025, and it's Friday. Uh-oh. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Okay, folks, if you have lucky socks, today's the day to wear them. Knock on wood whenever you get a chance. Do a happy times, good vibes, keep all the problems away dance. It is Friday the 13th, and you got to do something to counteract the bad luck, right? Well, at least that's what folk tradition and superstition would have you believe. But isn't it kind of strange when you really think of it? How did it ever become such a widely agreed upon bad omen to have the 13th day of a month fall on the last day of the week? Well, we don't really know. This is a very old superstition, born from the intersection of two separate and quite old superstitions. A double whammy, if you will. Now, there's the bad luck supposedly inherent in the number 13, of course. That one's probably not as old as some folks would like to think. Does numbering of laws in Hammurabi's code skip 13? Yes, in some published versions of the ancient Mesopotamian text, but the original carved stone wasn't actually numbered at all. It was an early 20th century translator who decided there ought to be numbers, but not the unlucky one. That said, the origins of fear around 13 do extend back pretty far, and they come in contrast to a number that people used to find especially satisfying. In some parts of the ancient world, 12 was considered the number of completion or perfection. The Sumerians based their entire numerical system on 12. The way we track time goes back to that. Hercules had 12 labors. There were 12 gods on Mount Olympus, 12 zodiac signs, 12 tribes of Israel. It's also just a really great number in math. The fact that it can be divided by a lot of smaller numbers is really handy, and it falls into a bunch of the categories that mathematicians have for numbers based on how they can work out particularly nicely in equations. It's a semi-perfect number, a refactorable number, a Pell number, and one of just two sublime numbers. I'll leave it to you to look up what any of those actually are. Suffice it to say, it means math nerds think 12 is pretty cool. But when you have a perfect balance and then add an extra, things get sort of thrown off kilter. Jesus and the 12 disciples made for 13 around the table at the Last Supper, and that extra turned out to be the betrayer, Judas. And that's the precise example that Christians in the Middle Ages would point to as the main reason why 13 was a very bad number that ought to be avoided. When I studied music history in college, I learned that the Catholic Church had a lot of very strict rules about church music in the medieval era, and a lot of them had to do with numbers. The rhythms should always be based on 3-beat patterns because of the Trinity, or else God would be mad. That sort of thing. Which I mention just to say that Christianity went through a phase that was low-key obsessed with numerology and omens. And that phase was also a time when the church governed just about everything in Western culture. So it's really only natural that there would be some lingering weirdness about numbers in the culture at large. And 13's bad reputation certainly extended beyond the church before long. We've got tarot card decks dating back to the early 16th century that give the death card the number 13. So, what about the Friday part of Friday the 13th? Well, that's actually a similar story. These days, Friday is celebrated. It's the last day of the work week, the start of a fun break. But back before weekends were a thing, when most people worked pretty much any day that they weren't in a worship service, Friday was actually the unluckiest day. And again, it was at least partly because of the medieval church. According to the Bible, Jesus was crucified on a Friday, so it became the day for performing penance for your sins, which is, of course, unpleasant and can feel like really bad luck, especially in a time and place where that penance meant that as a baseline, everyone needed to fast on Fridays. Put that together with 13, and you get the superstition that has come all the way down to us. Now, on June 13th in particular, a lot of good things have happened. It's the day in 313 that Emperor Constantine granted religious freedom to citizens of the Roman Empire. It's when Rhode Island banned the importation of slaves in 1774. And 3 years later on this date, Lafayette showed up in Charleston to start helping the Continental Army win the Revolutionary War. But locally, there's more mixed bit of history tied to this date. Nathan Bedford Forrest, the slave trader turned controversial Confederate general and Grand Wizard of the KKK, was born on June 13th down in Chapel Hill, Tennessee, which makes today officially Nathan Bedford Forrest Day in this state, a fact that governors were long legally required to declare each year, although those declarations were often made as quietly as possible. Governor Bill Lee ended that practice in 2020. In just a few minutes, there are problematic reports out of Kentucky related to one of the biggest investments in Tennessee. That's coming up after the newscast.
At WPLN, we tell stories about honoring our families.
If he become a monk, that means that mom and dad will go to heaven when they pass away.
And preserving memories.
I never heard of a Rosenwald school. Nobody never told me that's where I went.
I'm Char Daston, and my reporting connects you with your neighbors and the important moments in their lives.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was wrongly deported to El Salvador, is due in Nashville's federal court this morning, 1 week after being returned to the United States. Prosecutors say that Garcia is a member of the MS-13 gang and that he's been moving people without legal status from Texas to Maryland. Garcia's attorney says he's skeptical of the charges because his client's wrongful deportation has sparked criticism of the Trump administration's immigration policy. Garcia will be arraigned in Nashville since his charges stem from a 2022 traffic stop by the Tennessee Highway Patrol. The THP has recently entered an agreement to aid federal immigration agents and helped carry out hundreds of arrests in Nashville's immigrant corridor last month. The Tennessee Department of Correction is removing some inmates from a privately operated prison after a troubling incident this weekend. On Sunday night, a group of men held at Trousdale-Turner Correctional Center took over a control room and used it to open the cells of about 100 prisoners. Some lit fires in the building, and at least 2 guards were taken hostage. After officials regained control, they put the facility on an extended lockdown. 4 people were treated for injuries. The Tennessean reports the state is transferring some inmates to state-run prisons, although it's not yet clear how many are being moved. That follows calls from some community members for the state to intervene at Trousdale-Turner. That county's district attorney tells News Channel 5 he receives about 90 criminal cases a year related to problems at the prison. Nashville's district attorney recently chose not to file charges in the case of a man who struck a transgender woman in the head last month. Now the Metro Council's LGBTQ caucus is asking the DA to take a closer look and consider whether the incident falls under Tennessee's hate crime law. The attack occurred at a storage facility on Charlotte Pike. It was caught on surveillance footage, which is posted on the website of the Tennessee Lookout. The video clearly shows an open-handed strike to the victim's head, but there's no audio, and the people involved have differing accounts of what was said leading up to the physical interaction. The victim and her friend say the attacker used homophobic and transphobic slurs. An attorney for the attacker, who is black, says he was provoked by the use of racist language and says the woman threw a milkshake at him when they were outside the building. Neither party has yet filed civil charges. The Southern Baptist Convention's public policy arm has seen a lot of backlash in the past year. But as the Nashville-based SBC concluded its annual meeting this week, WPLN's Miriam reports that the board has survived a narrow vote.
The SBC's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission got pushback earlier this year when it signed a letter to President Trump opposing the administration's end of sanctuary protections for churches. And the ERLC's president, Brent Leatherwood, was nearly fired after commending Joe Biden for dropping out of the presidential race in the fall. Still, the commission is safe from dissolution this year, as the SBC chose to focus on its opposition to gay marriage. The delegation called for a repeal of a now decade-old Supreme Court decision that legalized same-sex unions. Mariana Baca-Yao, WPLN News.
Add Middle Tennessee State University to the list of colleges ending diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. MTSU's student newspaper Sidelines reports that an email sent campus-wide says the move is an effort to comply with executive orders from the Trump administration and state regulations signed into law last month. The changes will affect scholarship programs, services offered to students, and the way the school communicates on its website and in publications. In the email, MTSU President Sidney McPhee acknowledges the change poses challenges and says the university is actively working to make sure students and employees feel, quote, supported. Books touching on sexuality and race are being pulled off the shelves in Tennessee. The ACLU is suing to keep those books in schools, and they've chosen to bring that lawsuit in Rutherford County. WPLN's Camelia Burris reports on why.
Beloved by Toni Morrison and The Perks of Being a Wallflower are no longer available in Rutherford County schools. The ACLU argues that violates the First Amendment rights of both students and authors.
When you do provide a library, one of the things that the First Amendment is clear about that you cannot do is remove books because you just don't like their content.
That's ACLU Legal Director Stella Yarbrough at a town hall this week. She says book bans are happening all over Tennessee, but the ACLU chose to file in Rutherford County for two reasons: community support and a strong public record.
We had the school board members stating publicly things like, I don't like these books and I won't read them.
The ACLU is asking that the school board put back any books that were removed and to stop banning more books. Camelia Burris, WPLN News.
Workers have entered the final phase of fixing the damage to downtown Nashville infrastructure caused by the Christmas Day bombing nearly 4.5 years ago. But there's still plenty left to fix. News Channel 5 reports the city's completed complex repairs and reworked the stormwater system on the block of 2nd Avenue where the explosion took place. Other underground work is underway right now. Officials say they could reopen that portion of the street to traffic by the end of the year. The hollowed-out buildings directly opposite the blast are another matter. It's up to the private owners to handle that work, and that rebuilding will likely take years to complete. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. As work advances on the Ford BlueOval plant in West Tennessee, there's troubling information out about workplace safety at the BlueOval electric vehicle battery facility in Kentucky. Courier-Journal newspaper reporters Connor Griffin and Olivia Evans spent months combing through labor records, interviewing workers, and piecing together a pattern of workplace injuries and issues. They sat down with the Kentucky Center for Investigative Reporting's Jake Ryan to discuss the findings.
What did you find, and what got you onto the story?
Sure. So the thing that initially got us started on this story was in early 2024, we discovered there was mold exposure at the plant. So after we had requested those records and wrote a short story in 2024, we were continually requesting records and following up to see what the status of the plant was and where things were going at that point throughout the year, especially as it was leading up to production starting this year.
Yeah, and the thing about these labor records is these are state investigations that are ongoing, and a lot of the time these preliminary records about how the investigation is going aren't releasable yet, so we have to kind of keep making requests as the investigations come along. And so that was most of last year after the mold information became public. We were kind of going through those, and that kind of culminated in this investigation this month.
Olivia, what did some of the employees tell you all? Because you all actually talked to the people behind some of these documents. What were they kind of describing about their experiences inside this huge facility? And a lot of people that are hearing this are going to recognize it because it's a behemoth of a structure down I-65 that if you look off, you can see it. So what's it like inside that building?
So we went down to Glendale and we spoke with workers in person down there, and a lot of workers were telling us that in general they feel unsafe. There were lots of specific mentions about mold. There was mentions about uncertainty with what the chemicals were and how the chemicals were being used. Lots of concern was raised around PPE. The workers were telling us that they don't feel they're provided with enough PPE and the proper quality of PPE. The company has explicitly denied this multiple times and said that workers' claims that they don't have PPE are both false and malicious, but that's been something that workers shared with us. And on top of that, workers were also telling us and providing medical documentation that their health was impacted by working at this plant. And so we had workers tell us and be able to prove it with their medical documentation that they were diagnosed with exposure to mold. One worker was diagnosed with asthma, and then after she was fired from the plant, within a few weeks of her firing, she had a medical checkup, and her doctor noted that she no longer presented with asthma.
How do you follow this story? What's next? This is, the EV industry is kind of a big thing that the state of Kentucky is investing in. Is it something that you continue to follow?
Absolutely. So the next thing specifically that we're looking into is the National Labor Relations Board has been hearing a contest from BlueOval SK saying that the workers at the battery park in Glendale should not be able to unionize at this point. The workers filed for unionization earlier this year after launching a public campaign in late 2024. So that'll be the next thing that I'm immediately looking into, because a lot of these health and safety concerns that the workers shared with us and raised is one of the key elements as to why they want to unionize and what's gone on behind that campaign and that filing for an election. So just keeping status on that and seeing what's to come with that.
Something we heard from a lot of workers that we talked to was that they're not in full production yet. And so there's concerns that when they are in full production, some of these concerns could be kind of amplified, and if the safety issues aren't addressed before they're in full production, there could be more risk to workers.
All right, well, we'll be looking for your stories, and we really appreciate the work. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That story was shared with us through the Mid-South Appalachian Newsroom. We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. That little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up next week.